What's up, slow-mos? Number one Marmaduke fan coming at you with another Sonic Select review. The Sonic Select books, these aren't the Sonic Archives, which I think are the complete editions. These are sort of highlights from the Archie Comics Sonic series, generously shared with us by the friend of the channel, number one Sonic the Hedgehog fan. Thank you, number one Sonic fan. All right, Sonic Select Book 2. I enjoyed about half the stories in this book, and there are some improvements. So I think when I reviewed book 1, I thought some of the Knuckles issues were a little weird, like just him floating around, monologuing to himself in his like very Brooklynese sort of voice. Book 2, so basically I've never read the Archie comics before, and my friend gave me these as a way of maybe kind of like introducing me to some of it. I have heard people talk about the weirdness of the Archie Sonic comics. I've heard good and bad things about it, but the consistent thing I've always heard is that they're really weird. And I'm starting to get the feel for the weirdness, but I actually really dug this volume, and I would recommend it. So let's hop into it. So part 1 is, Ken Pender's name jumps out at me a lot because he's kind of become a meme now. He wasn't the only artist working on some of these issues, but I'm just going to nickname this the Ken Penders style. So the Ken Penders style, in my definition, is when the Sonic characters are a little off model or a little wall-eyed. I mean, they're tricky characters to draw. I feel like it's all in how stylized they are that makes them work. And if you don't quite nail them, they feel like they're kind of like staring off into space a little bit. So I don't know much about the Ken Penders drama that came later, but that is kind of like a mark of about half of the stories. However, I actually don't mind that. I feel like comics are supposed to be kind of like a quick, cheap, easy to make, easy to print medium, right? Like all of the great early comic artists, they weren't Michelangelo and they weren't Rembrandt. They were sort of cranking these out on cheap paper for 10 cents a pop for kids, right? So for me, like that's actually part of the charm of comics. And actually, I kind of enjoyed some of the stories that Ken Penders was working on. I feel like he had a instinct that you have to give these video game characters like a little bit of their own backstory and development. So like one thing that shows up quick is Knuckles gets his own team, the Chaotix, who show up in one of the games I haven't played. But this is useful because my criticism of the last volume was it's kind of weird just watching Knuckles float around all by himself, talking to himself. Now he's got like a team of dudes to back him up and go on their own adventures. There was also like very clearly an element where they're trying to make Knuckles his own cool, unique thing. Like if you didn't like Sonic's and his 90s attitude, maybe you'd like Knuckles and his lonely boy hanging out on his island with his cool dreadlocks billowing in the wind, right? Like he had his own vibe, where if you liked one, you'd probably like the other. But they didn't just want him to be Sonic's bestest buddy. They wanted him to be like his own independent type of character. Now, I marked this page because there's some really cool stuff in this issue. What is this? I think it's called like Sonic versus Knuckles, or actually I'm going to set you guys down because I want to get the title of this so you can find it later. Here we go. All right, so it's the Super Sonic versus Hyper Knuckles #1 special, and there was some really, really good art and some really creative fight scenes in this issue. So this kind of like stood head and shoulders above the rest. So neat thing number 1 is they've got this whole cast of characters from the cartoon, right? Like Sally Acorn and the Freedom Fighters. Now they've got to introduce Knuckles and all these new video game characters. So they came up with just like a creative little idea that Sally knows Knuckles from childhood because she used to visit his island. That's just great. It gives Knuckles some kind of connection to Sally and maybe gives Sonic one extra reason to be jealous and feisty around Knuckles. So that's just like a very neat, very simple idea. And this issue also mixes in some silly and cartoony but creative over-the-top fighting techniques. Like Sonic can move his feet super fast, while Knuckles can move his hands super fast, so he can use his super speedy fists to speed him up. Things like that. I want to get the artist for that. Let's see. Oh, where'd it go? Crash of the Titans. I think that's it. Yeah. Art Mawini, and inking was by Rich Kozlowski. It was very, it was sort of like they got the feel for the models in Crash of the Titans, and they were willing to try some like neat perspective stuff to make the fight scene kind of jump out. So that was a really good issue. Next was this is a infamous story arc where Sonic gets put on trial for he gets court-martialed for treason to Knothole. And it's actually like really well done, in fact. So they give you like a quick little recap update where Sonic proposed letting himself be roboticized as a way of taking down Robotnik, and the council unanimously reject that. Then he gets kidnapped and roboticized anyway. So, of course, the residents of Knothole think that he must have done it on purpose, contrary to orders. And they bring in our boy Knuckles to beat some sense into Mecha Sonic. So he's not Metal Sonic from the video game. Mecha Sonic is Sonic the Hedgehog roboticized and turned into a robot. The penciler was Pat Spaziante, and the inker was Harvey Mercaducazio. So I'm guessing Italian talent. What was neat about this is it almost had a little bit of an abstract anime quality. Like you can tell they sort of elongated the figures and made them more humanoid. I didn't like some of the abstract faces. Some of the abstract faces were a little wonky, but I think there was one page here, kind of stuff like this where they have like the aerial mecha battles. It's almost like a mecha anime or something. That was pretty cool. So what stood out to me about this is you go in the Archie comics, you can go from like kind of like the more crude and cartoony Ken Penders style to something that's a little bit more clean and on model for the characters, to something that's just really different and out there. It's a little abstract and it's a little weird for Sonic, but I kind of dug how different it was. So I actually kind of appreciate the weirdness and the differentness and the experimentation in some of these. Also, just my comment on the idea of Sonic being tried for treason. I actually kind of love it. So this is great because it's the classic, the two good guys need to duke it out with each other. And even like a cool, he got turned into a robot, so we got to turn Knuckles into a robot to stop him. Like that kind of classic two heroes duking it out aspect. One thing I like about this sort of tragic misunderstanding is Sonic always had a hot dog personality where he might be willing to go out and do things on his own that would get him in trouble with Princess Sally and the other freedom fighters. So it's really neat that they actually did a plot that plays on that. Like you could it's believable that that Sonic could get in trouble being a hot dog and being a hero. And in this case, he wasn't doing that. He was kidnapped. And so the misunderstanding is, they think he did it willingly. He didn't do it willingly, but it kind of fits with his character for him to go off and do something irresponsible and to have the, what's different about it is in the cartoon, of course, everything gets wrapped up in 30 minutes. And, if there was a fight or something, it always gets resolved and the world returns back to normal at the end. But this gives it kind of like a lasting consequence where he's falsely accused of treason and he's going to have to either beat that rap or suffer the consequences. And I mark this just as an example of them doing like weird world building stuff. They have this character called Mammoth Mogul, who is very clearly heavily inspired by Vandal Savage from DC Comics, where he's an immortal tyrant going back to caveman days, and he's hoping to fill the power gap left by Robotnik and push Robotnik out of power so he can be the tyrant of the world. It's a lot of goofy fun. I really enjoyed it. So good things it did. It starts giving Knuckles kind of like a backstory. He had a relationship with his father. He wants to live up to his father's legacy. Knuckles has his own gaggle of heroes he goes on little adventures with. Some great, good old, like one good guy versus the other good guy. Knock him down, beat him up, scraping your knuckles, kinds of fights that are just like a classic of little kids superpower comics. And so far, I really like this arc. I like the premise of it, and I like the execution of it, because they're not doing like let's deconstruct Sonic the Hedgehog thing. They just had like a really good idea for a plot. And there's even kind of like a tragic aspect where even as they're putting him on trial, he's still like the hero who's saved their bacon time and time again. So Sally, you can tell, is really hurt by this, but she feels she has to do her duty. So if you like the Sonic cartoon, I'd still recommend this. It's starting to get a little weird. They're starting to mix in like their own world building stuff and alternate universes and other villains and characters, but I really enjoy it. It's very fun, straightforward, super powered animal comics. All right, that's it. I'm number one Marmaduke fan. I love you guys. Catch you later.